welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens. I'm the author of the young adult fantasy Fury and Rising and Into the Unreal, and this is English Nerd. So today I'm going to attempt to talk about Book 3 of A Tale of Two Cities, chapters 8 and 9. That's A Hand at Cards and The Game Made, two of my all-time favorite chapters in the world. Also, the chapters are clearly connected. We have The Hand at Cards and then The Game Made. There's an end to that hand of cards at the next chapter. So diving in then, all about A Tale of Two Cities, chapter 8, A Hand at Cards. So Darnay has just been retaken by the Republic. He's been denounced by 3 people, the Defarges and one unnamed person. And we flash sideways to Miss Pross and Jerry Cruncher, who are doing the shopping for the Darnays and Mr. Lorry and everybody else. As I mentioned before, Miss Pross can't speak a lick of French at all, so her process is just going around pointing at something, holding up the number of hands, or the number of fingers that she's willing to pay for that item, and then that's kind of how she negotiates prices. Meanwhile, Jerry, who has a cold in these chapters, is holding the basket, kind of following her around. So they stop at a few different smaller shops. They do all that they can not to draw attention to themselves more than they automatically would just by being so strange. So they stop into a wine shop called the Good Republican Brutus of Antiquity, which is just a fabulous name for, all things considered, Good Republican Brutus of Antiquity. I assume they're talking about the Brutus that betrayed and stabbed Julius Caesar for wanting to amass too much power to himself. I mean, that would just be logical, right? So in they go, and Miss Pross immediately sees somebody. She sees somebody turn around, and then she just screams, and everybody turns around. It's like the cantina scene in Star Wars, after Han Solo shoots Greedo and everybody turns around and they see what's going on, and then they kind of turn back to what they were doing because it's not that unusual for something terrible to be happening in this bar. So similarly, everybody turns around when they hear Miss Pross scream because they assume that somebody's been attacked or killed or something, but that's not the case. In fact, she can barely utter a word until she finally says, "Oh, Solomon, dear Solomon." It's Solomon Pross, guys. The brother who took all of her money and abandoned her completely, but that she amazingly forgives. She, back in the Hundreds of People chapter, mentioned that nobody is worthy of Lady Bird, nobody is worthy of Lucy, except maybe my brother Solomon. If he hadn't made that mistake in life, he could have been such a great man. And she repeats that idea here, even as Solomon starts getting angry with her for drawing attention and calling him Solomon. "Do you want to be the death of me? Don't call me Solomon," he starts saying, and leads her out of the shop. He's really cruel to her, actually. There's no joy in his seeing his sister after all this time. Miss Pross is the only one who seems happy. Now, logically, those two reactions should be reversed. I mean, Miss Pross is the one who has all the reason to be angry, and Solomon is the one who should be thrilled to be forgiven for what he's done, and yet it's Miss Pross who is treated cruelly and is crying. He's just very mean, even though Miss Pross keeps saying things like, "My English brother Solomon, that had the makings in him of one of the best and greatest men in his native country, and now I find you here." I mean, she's all beaten up about this. So, shocking. We have Solomon Pross on the scene, and then Jerry Cruncher, with his super gravelly, extra gravelly voice, says, "Okay, may I ask a favor as to whether your name is John Solomon or Solomon John?" Which gets the guy's attention. He's like, "Excuse me?" And Jerry Cruncher says, "I recognize you. I remember that you were called John back in England, and I can't reconcile what you're saying and what I remember of you, but he can't quite put the pieces together. And we get this moment, one of my all-time favorites in this book, and it goes like this. So Jerry says, "Well, I don't know what I mean, for I can't call to mind what your name was over the water, back in England." "No?" Solomon says. "No, but I'll swear it was a name of 2 syllables." "Indeed?" "Yes, the other one was 1 syllable. I know you. You was a spy witness at the Bailey. What in the name of the father of lies, own father to yourself, was you called at that time?" "Barsad," said another voice, striking in. And it's Sidney Carton. Sidney Carton! He shows up, and he just kind of saunters over and provides this crucial piece of information, because he doesn't forget a face, he doesn't forget a name. If you remember back in the Jackal chapter, it's true that Sidney Carton was called the Jackal, but he was also called Memory. Stryver called him Memory because he just can remember everything. And so he comes up, he provides the name. I love that moment. Out of the blue, here he is. And so we find out that Solomon Pross is John Barsad. John Barsad was an alias. What? People are mysteries. Things are coming together. This is crazy town. I love it. So anyway, here comes Sidney Carton, and immediately Carton kind of takes Barsad or Solomon or whatever you want to call him now under his wing, and he goes, why don't we take a walk here? Let's talk about some things. I'm aware that you're a spy, and yeah, so let's go to Tellson's, shall we? And although he never threatens Barsad outright, it's really clear that he has information that could get Barsad in trouble, and he's willing to use it if Barsad doesn't go with him. And so finally Barsad goes, okay, fine, I'll go. I would think that you wouldn't treat me this way, considering who my sister is, that you care about her. And Carton says, oh, I could think of no better way to care for Miss Pross than to get rid of you. So, I mean, it's so good. I love this Carton moment here. He was such a terrible person at the beginning of the story, and now he's using his intelligence and even his tendency to kind of hang around and be all insolent and everything to his advantage, because all that reckless energy is making Barsad extremely nervous, which is part of Carton's plan. Okay. So Carton informs the group that Darnay's been arrested again. Everybody is horrified, and we get this part of the conversation, which is where we get the title, A Hand at Cards. So, in short, said Sidney, this is a desperate time when desperate games are played for desperate stakes. Let the doctor play the winning game, I will play the losing one. No man's life here is worth purchase. Anyone carried home by the people today may be condemned tomorrow. Now, the stake I have resolved to play for, in case of the worst, is a friend in the conciergerie, and the friend I purpose to myself to win is Mr. Barsad. You need have good cards, sir, said the spy. I'll run them over, I'll see what I hold. Mr. Lorry, you know what a brute I am. I wish you'd give me a little brandy. It was put before him, and he drank off a glassful, drank off another glassful, pushed the bottle thoughtfully away. Okay, so a couple things to mention in this part of the conversation here. So Sidney Carton says we're gonna play a game, and the stakes that I'm going to play for are a friend in the conciergerie. So the conciergerie is another prison. It's not La Force, it's a different prison, and it's basically death row instead of La Force, which is where people would stay for longer amounts of time, basically until they were, massacred or executed later. But the conciergerie is the 24 hours, we're just going to hold you here until we take you to the guillotine. Now, Barsad is sometimes a turnkey at the conciergerie, and so Sidney says, all right, I'm gonna see what cards I have, metaphorical cards, and see if I can win that person on the inside there. And he actually, right after this, Sidney actually pretends to have this hand of cards and kind of runs him over, and and says, well, I have this one and this one and this one. And he starts, laying out these cards, these pieces of evidence that could get Barsad in tons of trouble. Basically, it's just blackmail is what it is. The other thing I want to point out here is, so Carton asks for brandy, which is unsurprising because, he's not suddenly not an alcoholic, I guess. So he gets some brandy, he drinks a couple of glassfuls, and then he pushes the bottle thoughtfully away. This is the first time that he's made any motion away from alcohol. It's a small one, but we see a bigger moment where he turns away from that kind of lifestyle in just a few pages, so I thought I would bring up this one. So Barsad, if you've been following the saga of Barsad, he was the dodgy witness swearing up and down all these lies at the Old Bailey at the beginning of the story. And then he was a spy for the aristocracy in France, because that's where the money was, of course, for the aristocracy against the revolutionaries before they actually revolted and stormed the Bastille. He's the one who comes in and tries to get all this information out of Madame Defarge. And now he is a spy on behalf of the revolutionaries, because now that's where the power has turned. All this information about shifting alliances and, in addition to some other dodgy things that he's done, put him in a ton of hot water. I mean, if the revolutionaries knew that he was at one time a spy for the aristocracy, that would be it for him. And Carton's aware of that, as with some other things. So Carton's ace in this hand at cards, he says, is the denunciation of Mr. Barsad to the nearest section committee. Look over your hand, Mr. Barsad. See what you have. Don't hurry. I love his attitude here. He's like, yeah, sure. See if you can best that. And then he has some more brandy. He sees that Barsad's getting more and more nervous as Carton's drinking, because if he drinks too much, his inhibitions will go away. He'll probably just run off and denounce him anyway. And Carton sees the nervousness on Barsad's face and just orders some more, which is bad, but just so good as well. I mean, he knows how to play this game. So Barsad doesn't really have a whole lot against Carton, but he's trying to hold out. He's trying to find a way not to give him what he wants, because if he goes into the prison with somebody who's not supposed to be there, for instance, and he gets caught, then it would have the same consequences as being denounced by Carton. The last card, as Carton's kind of going over them, the last card that he thinks of is, oh right, and also you are in cahoots with this other spy, this other known enemy of the Republic, I guess. And he realizes, oh gosh, it's Cly. It's Roger Cly, the other dodgy witness from the Old Bailey, way back at the beginning of book 2. He was disguised, but it's the same guy. And I bring this up because there's a great exchange here where Barsad says, oh, okay, well, that one I can contest. Literally, I cannot be in cahoots with Cly because he's dead, right? I mean, we, as the readers, even saw the funeral back in book 2, chapter 14. And the thing he says, I'll just read it for you. Let us be reasonable, said the spy, and let us be fair. To show you how mistaken you are and what an unfounded assumption yours is, I will lay before you a certificate of Cly's burial, which I happen to have carried in my pocketbook. With a hurried hand, he produced and opened it. Ever since. There it is. There's something really suspicious if somebody just carries around a death certificate with them at all times. It seems like you kind of have some extra stuff to prove there. You're protesting too much, as Shakespeare would say. So at first Carton goes, okay, well, maybe that's true, that Cly is dead. But then Mr. Cruncher, of all people, steps forward and says, okay, so you put Cly in his coffin? Barsad says, yes, sadly, we were friends, but I did. Well, who took him out of it? And it's fantastic because Cruncher knows that there was nothing but paving stones in that coffin. The body of Cly was not there because he went to dig up the body of Cly back in chapter 14 and found nothing except for paving stones, which is just, it's great. He's able to provide that evidence once again against Barsad, and Carton's very happy with this development. Mr. Lorry, on the other hand, who is there as well since they go to Tellson's, is not happy at all. Cruncher, if you remember, he works for Tellson's. He works for Lorry most of the time as an odd job man and messenger. And Lorry is all about the honor of Tellson's. He's spent his whole life on behalf of Tellson's. And so to find out in a roundabout way that Jerry has this body snatching business on the side that's completely illegal and just gross, it horrifies him, but we don't really get his reaction fully until the beginning of the next chapter. So Carton's thrilled. He says, oh yeah, great, so Cly feigned death, came back to life again. The revolutionaries are going to eat this up. Hopefully I don't need to point out another resurrection theme piece of evidence there, but we have, once again, more resurrection. Somebody who was, in this case, thought dead, who is now very much alive. So, at the end of this chapter, it ends with just two more quick things I want to mention, and that is, one, when Carton asks, okay, so you're a turnkey at the conciergerie, you can get in. Barsad responds, I tell you once for all, there's no such thing as an escape possible. I know you want to help Darnay, but you can't escape. Why need you tell me what I have not asked? So Carton doesn't actually ask for Barsad to help him, let Darnay escape. All he wants is to visit Darnay. That's it. Just open the door, close the door. That's all. He does not claim that he wants to save Darnay. He just wants access to him one time. And that's it. And then the chapter closes with Sidney Carton filling another glass of brandy and pouring it slowly out upon the hearth, watching it as it dropped. I mentioned at the beginning of the chapter, Carton pushes the bottle thoughtfully away. He ends up drinking some more, but there's this first tiny hint that maybe he's turning away from his bad habits, his dissolute ways, I guess. And here, it's a much more pronounced statement. He pours out the glass of brandy on the hearth. Now, brandy is fortified wine. We know that wine throughout this entire story, especially red wine, has represented blood ever since the wine shop chapter in book 1. And here we see not only a turning away from his bad habits where he's pouring out this drink instead of having it himself, but there's also this sense of spilled blood as well as he's pouring out this glass on the hearth. Okay, chapter 9, Game Made. I know this is a longer video, but I'm doing my best here. The first few pages are dedicated to Lorry and Cruncher, who have a conversation while Barsad and Carton kind of finish their quote-unquote card game in another room and hash out the details of what Barsad owes him. The only thing I want to say about that is this great response. It's easy to as a student, read Dickens and think, I gotta read my Dickens, but sometimes he's hilarious. So Lorry says, Jerry, come here. What have you been besides a messenger? After some cogitation, accompanied with an intent look at his patron, Mr. Cruncher conceived the luminous idea of replying, agricultural character? I do some agricultural work on the side. I mean, he does deal with dirt, but I mean, you have to admit that's pretty funny. So Mr. Lorry just chews him out a little bit, and Cruncher tries to get out of trouble, but I want to skip to after that because it's not the most important, that revelation that Cruncher is a resurrection man. So Carton essentially wins the hand at cards. The game is made. So if things should go poorly for Darnay, Carton has been promised access to Darnay one time. Again, he is not asked to rescue Darnay. That's not part of the deal. It's just access one time because Barsad / Solomon Bross can get in there. At this point, we have a really touching moment between Lorry and Carton, of all people. I've been saying over and over again that there's this sense that people are mysteries. I mean, we didn't even know who John Barsad really was this entire time. At the beginning of the story, we have a completely reason-focused Mr. Lorry, and here he begins to cry. He's overwhelmed with sadness for Darnay because he knows he's probably going to be sentenced to death, and for Lucy, whom he cares so deeply for, and Dr. Manette. And Carton, who started out as this horrible person with all these horrible habits, who treated people poorly, here is so kind. So I just want to show you. So Lorry's crying, and it says, Carton goes up to him and says, "You are a good man and a true friend. Forgive me if I notice that you are affected. I could not see my father weep and sit by careless, and I could not respect your sorrow more if you were my father. You are free from that misfortune, however." He's very sweet to Mr. Lorry, comforting him, and I think it's beautiful that we didn't know that either of these men had this side to them until we get to this part of the story. So Carton tries to rally Lorry's spirits and kind of turns to business, which always soothes Lorry. And he tells Mr. Lorry, please don't tell Lucy that I'm here. It might just make her worried. Don't tell her about the deal that I made with Barsad. It might give her false hopes. It might give her the wrong idea about what I might be doing. And he can't really help himself. At the end of that explanation, he says, how is she doing? How does she look now that Darnay has been taken away? And Lorry responds, "Anxious and unhappy, but very beautiful." And Carton gives this long grieving sound like a sigh. It's almost like a sob. And they're Lorry and Carton here are completely bonding over their care for Lucy. We know that back in the Fellow of No Delicacy chapter, Carton said that he would do anything at all for Lucy. And although Lorry hasn't necessarily said it outright, I think we could assume he would as well, to the best of his ability, do anything for Lucy. And so they sit there in silence for a second, and it's just so sad. Anyway, and then Carton asks, "Yours is a long life to look back on, isn't it?" Lorry says, "Yeah, 78. And you have been useful all your life, steadily and constantly occupied, trusted, respected, and looked up to." "I've been a man of business ever since I've been a man. Indeed, I may say that I was a man of business when a boy." "See what a place you fill at 78. How many people will miss you when you leave it empty?" "A solitary old bachelor. Nobody would weep for me." It's all of a sudden they're talking about what it's like to come to the end of your life. I mean, Lorry's quite old, certainly by this society's standards. He's almost 80. He knows that his life is coming to a close, and Carton starts asking him what that's like. What is it like to look back on your life and not have all these regrets? You have been useful, you've been trusted, respected. that hasn't been the case for Carton at all. And I think he envies Lorry's ability to look back on his life and say, yeah, my life has been a good one. So, if you could say, this is Carton again to Lorry, if you could say with truth to your own solitary heart tonight, I have secured to myself the love and attachment, the gratitude or respect of no human creature. I have won myself a tender place in no regard. I have done nothing good or serviceable to be remembered by. Your 78 years would be 78 heavy curses, would they not? And Lorry says, yeah, I think they would. I mean, it is almost like a father and son conversation, because Lorry, when he responds, says, yes, I think they would be. He knows that Carton is talking about himself as being the one who has not secured anybody's respect, that he's afraid that this has been the case for his own life. And Lorry is trying to help him see, a different way. It seems to me, there's not a huge amount of evidence for that, but I just think that this kind of conversation suggests that idea. And I can't get enough of this conversation. I cannot. Carton says, does your childhood seem far off? Is it like a big circle at the end? And they have this super candid conversation about what it's like to be old and come to the end of your life. And I love that these two actually kind of open themselves up to each other when they haven't done that to many other people in their entire lives. Okay, finally, Carton leaves. He goes walking through the streets of Paris alone at night because, of course, he does. It's not very safe, but whatever. Carton's still Carton, despite the fact that he's clearly changed in some fundamental ways. And he makes a few stops. First place he goes is to that corner that Lucy would go to where Darnay could sometimes see her in the Wood Sawyer chapter. And he runs into the Wood Sawyer, our mender of roads. And Carton asks how the guillotine's going. I don't know, maybe testing the waters to see if Darnay has a snowflake's chance of surviving the next couple days. And the mender of roads / Wood Sawyer says, "Ooh, it's going. It's fantastic. Sometimes the executioners complain of being exhausted. Figure this to yourself, citizen," he says. "He shaved the 63 today in less than 2 pipes. Less than 2 pipes. Word of honor. He killed 63 people in less than that amount of time." And Carton wants to strangle him so bad that he has to walk away. Understandably, I mean, it's not about guilt anymore with these revolutionaries. It's about just, giving food to the guillotine. It's like giving sacrifices to the guillotine, no matter who it is. I mean, who are these people? It's not that eye for an eye sense of justice that it was before. It's that earthquake that swallows a town, that grinds to pieces everything before it, like Madame Defarge said before. I tell you. Okay, then Carton goes to a chemist and gets a couple unnamed things. The chemist says something vague to the effect of, the consequences of mixing these things, and Carton says, yep, not a problem, and he keeps it. We don't know what the consequences of mixing the things are, but we assume because of the question that there must be something bad. And most importantly, I think, as Carton leaves the chemist, he starts reflecting back on his own life, thinking about some of his youth. So, says, "These solemn words, which had been read at his father's grave, arose in his mind as he went down the dark streets among the heavy shadows, with the moon and the clouds sailing on high above him. I am the resurrection and the life, saith the Lord. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live, and whoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die." So he thinks back to his father's funeral when he first heard these words. Now, those words are from John, the Gospel of John, chapter 11, when Jesus is going to raise Lazarus from the dead. So Jesus is speaking to Lazarus' sisters, here who are mourning and crying. Even Christ himself is weeping. Jesus wept, right? But here, right before he raises Lazarus from the dead, he says, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And he that liveth and believeth in me shall never die. So first of all, literal resurrection is referred to here. We have Lazarus. When Jesus says, I am the resurrection, of course, we think of Jesus' resurrection after dying on the cross. So we have some literal resurrection here, but we also have the introduction of this idea that there are two different kinds of life and two different kinds of death. This starts to make sense of that paradox that life and death are actually not mutually exclusive, not far from each other, because Jesus says, okay, I'm the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. How can you be simultaneously dead and alive? So here's my thought on this, and I think the book bears this out quite well. There are two different kinds of life. So there's physical life. You know, you're breathing, your heart's beating, you're walking around. And then there's an internal kind of life. So you could characterize these as like external life. You know, a biologist would say, yep, doctor would say, yep, you're alive. And then an internal kind of life, your spirit, your soul, your emotions, your mind. I think we've all had those days when we're technically we're alive, but inside we feel like there is no life. You know, it's almost like the color is seeped from the world, and there's no hope. You know, hopefully this is not a situation that you dwell in, like, you know, Carton at the beginning of the story. If that's the case, then, you know, call somebody, get some help. But it illustrates my point that life is not just this biological thing. There's something deeper and truer that I think we could consider even more life than more alive, I guess, than walking around. And it's caring for others. It's having a purpose. It's having hope for something. So this story doesn't dwell on the religious aspects exactly. It repeats this verse a lot. But I think in a broader sense, it dwells on that idea of being physically alive versus being internally, truly alive quite a bit. It's an enormously important idea to me, personally, because I had a friend. It's actually the friend that my sequel is dedicated to. And when I met her, she was, you know, perfectly healthy. Doctor would sign off on her being fully alive, but inside she was not doing well at all. There was some like just decay in her soul. And so we were friends for several years, and she ended up getting cancer like 9 years ago and died at 25. And the last time I saw her, she was wasting away. It was hard to see. So physically not doing well in the least. But inside she was so fully alive. I mean, it was pretty amazing to see. So for her, there was this switch, you know, exchanging one sort of life for another. So to me, when I see this section of the book, and she loved A Tale of Two Cities as well, I tend to think of her. So when we're reading these things, it's not just to check a box. You've got to read some Dickens. The ideas in here can be life-changing, and I just want to make that point. So, continuing. The last thing Carton does that night, besides just looking at the river and that sort of thing, is he passes by a theater that's letting out, and it says, at one of the theater doors there was a little girl with a mother, looking for a way across the street through the mud. He carried the child over, and before the timid arm was loosed from his neck, asked her for a kiss. And then he thinks once again about that verse, I am the resurrection and the life, etc. So they're looking for a way across the mud, and he zeroes in on this mother with a little girl. And it's pretty clear why. It's not a random choice. He's drawn to these two because of Lucy and little Lucy. You know, he's going to try to help them, and at the moment these are kind of the stand-ins. So so the night passes this way. Carton really doesn't get any sleep. He just wanders and he thinks, and he runs these errands all the way up until the trial. So Carton goes to the trial, Darnay, Lucy, everybody goes to the trial of Darnay, where he'll be officially exonerated and acquitted, or he'll be sentenced to death. Those are really the only options. And it's at this trial that we find out who the third denouncer is. We have Ernest Defarge, Therese Defarge, because we finally figure out their first names, and Alexandra Manette, Dr. Manette. So Dr. Manette stands up. He's outraged. He goes, how dare you? I've never denounced my son-in-law. I've done nothing but work on his behalf this whole time. And then Monsieur Defarge explains it has to do with something that we found in the Bastille. So back in chapter 21, when Defarge and Jacques III go to 105 North Tower, they're looking around the stones and they find one that has AM etched into it, and then the chapter kind of flashes away so you don't see, but it's clear from this that they dug out that stone, and behind it there was this letter from Dr. Manette that they're claiming denounces Darnay. So that's what chapter 10 is going to be all about, is that letter. Let it be read, they say. So I knew this would be a longer video. Thanks for sticking with me, but man, these chapters are so good. I love chapter 8. I love chapter 9. So if you have any questions or comments, put those down below. I'd love to hear from you. Make sure to like this video if you like it, and don't forget to subscribe for more English nerdy goodness. All right, I'll see you soon.